Why does it feel like the closer you get, the further he drifts? One moment, his eyes hold the warmth of everything you've ever dreamed of. The next, they look like a locked door you never noticed before. You search for what changed. Was it something you said? Something you missed? But this isn't about words. It's about an ancient tension moving beneath the surface of his soul. A battle that started long before you arrived. And now, in your presence, it's waking up. You feel him freeze in those moments of tenderness, not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much. His silence isn't emptiness. It's the weight of everything he's never been allowed to feel. Carl Jung wrote of the persona, the mask we wear to survive the world. And men, they're often taught from birth that their mask must never slip, that to love is to risk exposure. To love deeply is to stand naked before uncertainty. So when you hold him, truly hold him, you aren't just touching his heart. You're shaking the very structure of his identity. You've seen it, that micro moment when his body tenses as you reach for his vulnerability. That flicker in his eyes when you say something too kind, too real. He's been trained to silence the soft parts, and now you've stirred them. That scares him more than losing you, because to stay open would mean letting go of control. It would mean trusting that he won't collapse if he cries, that he won't be ridiculed if he confesses that sometimes he doesn't know how to be a man who loves. Here's the paradox. The deeper his love, the stronger his need to flee. You think, if he truly loved me, he'd move closer. But in his world, closeness is the trigger for collapse. He fears being consumed, fears losing his autonomy. Yet ironically, the real self he's running from is the one that could lead him to wholeness. Jung once said, "Where your fear is, there is your task." And this very point of withdrawal, is his task. But you can't do it for him. You can only witness it without making it about you. That's where your awakening begins. To realize that his pulling away isn't always rejection. It's the soul's defense against unfamiliar terrain. You see, behind every man who pulls away is a boy who once reached out and was met with shame. A boy who was told to toughen up, to stop crying, to man up. Love doesn't erase that conditioning. It exposes it. It reactivates the wounds with terrifying accuracy. He pulls away, not because the love isn't real, but because it's too real, and his inner world has no map for how to hold that safely. But here's the twist. If he didn't care, he wouldn't pull away at all. Indifference stays present out of politeness. But real love? It activates the archetypal battleground. Masculine control versus emotional surrender. Ego versus essence. His withdrawal is a spiritual seizure, a psychological thunderstorm. The esoteric wisdom of the Kabbalists speaks of tzimtzum, the idea that even divine love had to pull away, to make space. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we bury, repress, and deny. For most men, the shadow holds their tenderness, their fear of inadequacy, their unhealed longing to be loved without having to earn it. And love, especially real, soul-level love, pulls the shadow into the light. It drags it from the corners and demands it be seen. And that terrifies him. It's not you he's running from. It's the ancient pieces of himself that you awaken. You love his laughter, his strength, the safety of his arms. But you've also seen the flicker of pain behind his smile. You've caught glimpses of his hidden softness. And the moment you offer to hold that part of him, it recoils. Because to be truly seen is, in the shadow's logic, to risk annihilation. What if she sees my shame? What if she discovers I'm not as confident as I pretend? What if she realizes I don't know how to love her the way she deserves? The tragic beauty is that his love for you is exactly what stirs these fears. Your presence becomes a mirror, not just reflecting his potential, but also everything he hasn't yet integrated. This is where the first emotional peak rises, When you realize your love is not just a bomb, but a catalyst. You're not just a woman to him. You're an initiator. And initiators don't just comfort, they awaken, even when the other isn't ready. In ancient mystery schools, initiates had to pass through a phase called the desert, a time of stripping down, disorientation, and facing one's inner darkness. His pulling away. It's that desert, the moment before clarity, the confrontation before rebirth. He's not trying to hurt you, he's trying to survive his own awakening. But the feminine wound responds with abandonment stories. You start thinking, I wasn't enough. But that's the trap. The truth is, your very enoughness, your depth, your presence, is what activated his shadow in the first place. He didn't withdraw because you lacked something. He withdrew because you saw too much. And then comes the esoteric idea. In some mystical traditions, there's the belief that the soul splits before birth, and each fragment carries pieces of truth the other cannot yet face. When those fragments meet, like yours and his, they trigger not just love, but remembrance. And remembrance always shakes the ego. You wonder, should I have dimmed myself? Number. Your brilliance is not the problem. His unintegrated shadow is. But don't turn that into superiority, because we all have shadows, and love, real love, reveals them. So here's the paradox you now live in. To love a man who's disappearing is to hold space for the truth he's not ready to tell, even to himself. It's to understand that his silence isn't rejection. It's a scream he was never allowed to make. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not chase after him, but sit with your own ache until it teaches you something new about yourself. This is the second emotional peak. The moment you stop trying to fix him and start meeting the version of yourself who can stand in her fullness, even when the other retreats. Because this isn't just his journey. It's yours too. Your fear of loss, your hunger for validation, your ache to be chosen. It all rises here, asking to be met, not by him, but by you. And when you face it, you stop being the woman waiting by the door and become the one who holds the threshold. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This moment, this confusing, heartbreaking, paradoxical space is your invitation to consciousness, and consciousness is never painless, but it is always sacred. So don't rush, don't demand closure, don't make his confusion your flaw. Just breathe. You are not here to be consumed by his shadow. You are here to hold your own. And if one day he chooses to return, not as a man running from himself, but as one willing to be seen, you'll meet not the boy who pulled away, but the soul who walked through fire and came back whole. Until then, you become the flame that doesn't flicker, even when the wind howls. It wasn't supposed to feel this empty. You were building something, weren't you? A closeness that felt sacred, a rhythm that finally made sense. And then suddenly, it all slips. Like holding water in your hands, the tighter you try to grasp it, the faster it disappears. He says he needs space, or maybe he says nothing at all, just goes quiet, changes, retreats, and you begin to feel like you've fallen into some hidden crevice in his mind, someplace he can't take you, no matter how much you love him. You think you're losing him, but what's really happening is he's losing the version of himself that knew how to survive without you, and that unraveling terrifies him. Jung called it individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are by integrating the unconscious parts of ourselves. But here's the truth most people don't tell you. Individuation doesn't feel like growth at first. It feels like dying, especially for men raised to believe that to love is to lose power. That intimacy means giving up control, that showing weakness means forfeiting worth. So when he starts to fall for you, deeply, not just romantically, it cracks the shell of who he thought he was. He begins to feel like he's failing you, even as he longs for you, like he should know how to do this by now, like he should be stronger. And beneath that is a primal wound, the belief that he is not enough. This is the first emotional peak, the moment you recognize that his withdrawal is not about you at all. It is a self-initiated descent into the underworld of his psyche, not because he wants to hurt you, but because he's terrified that staying close will expose the parts of him he can't yet love. You see, we don't run from love. We run from what love reveals, and sometimes the person who awakens our soul is the same person our ego cannot yet withstand. You touched something in him. Maybe it was the way you stayed present when he faltered. Maybe it was how you saw beauty in his scars. Or maybe it was how you never asked him to be anything but human. Whatever it was, it breached the old story. The one that said, "You are only worthy if you perform." Now, without realizing it, he's begun questioning everything: his purpose, his masculinity, his right to be loved without earning it. And this is where the ancient mystical traditions speak, where the ego must be dismantled before truth can rise. In Gnostic texts, there is the concept of kenosis, a sacred emptying out. To know one's soul, the false self must collapse. That collapse, you're witnessing it. And it's not gentle. He may pull away with silence. He may lash out. He may behave in ways that seem cold or disoriented. But underneath it all is a quiet chaos. His soul is breaking from old definitions. He cannot be the man he once was, but he doesn't yet know who he's becoming. And in that gap, between old and new, he withdraws. This is where the second emotional peak arrives, the moment you stop needing answers and instead meet the mystery. Because this is your individuation too. You thought love would be the merging of two. But what if love is the crucible that forges the self? And what if your task is not to hold him, but to hold you? To not abandon yourself while he finds himself? You begin to see the deeper paradox. The man who pulls away isn't broken. He's awakening. But awakening is not romantic. It's raw. It's destabilizing. It's sacred. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And right now, fate is being rewritten, in silence, in solitude, in the painful, necessary distance between who he was and who he must become. You don't have to understand it all. You don't have to fix it. You only have to honor the space between. This space, the one you fear, is where transformation happens. And yes, it hurts. It hurts to hold love with no guarantee. It hurts to watch him retreat and not know if he will return. It hurts to see your own fear of abandonment resurface like a ghost. But that's your own wound, asking for attention. And perhaps this moment, this pulling away, is a mirror for your own becoming. Because the real alchemy doesn't happen when he comes back. It happens when you stay with your truth, even in his absence. And then, one day, he may return, not as a man afraid to be seen, but as one who has met his shadows and chosen wholeness. Or he may not. But either way, you will be different. You will no longer seek safety in someone else's presence. You will no longer define your worth by someone else's readiness. You will have become the kind of soul that cannot be abandoned, because you no longer abandon yourself. And maybe that's what love came here to teach you, not how to hold someone else, but how to become someone who doesn't disappear when the other does. There's a particular kind of ache that comes when he pulls away, just as the bond begins to deepen. It isn't loud. It doesn't scream or slam doors. It lingers like a low fog, the kind that makes everything feel further than it actually is. You sense him turning inward, not in anger, not in betrayal, but in a quiet kind of retreat, a disappearing act without malice. And you whisper to yourself in the dark, "He's leaving me. But what if he's not? What if he's returning to himself? You see, in a world that teaches men to perform rather than to feel, love becomes a strange and terrifying thing. It's not that he doesn't feel it. It's that he feels too much. And real love, soul love, not just desire or admiration, activates an ancient crisis. A call to wholeness. A call to face himself in ways he's never dared. And that call? It's too loud to ignore. So he retreats. Not to punish you, not to ghost you, not to manipulate or test your devotion. He retreats because something inside him has been stirred from slumber, and now he must sit with what it means. Carl Jung often said that the journey inward is one few are brave enough to take. But love, if real, demands it. Love doesn't just soften us, it strips us. It burns through illusion, incinerates defense, and demands we meet ourselves, naked and unguarded. So he steps away, not from you, but from the self he can no longer be. And here's the first emotional peak, when you realize that his pulling away might be an act of reverence, not rejection. He isn't choosing distance to escape the love. It's because he cannot fully meet it until he meets himself. But how easy it is, in his absence, to forget this. How easy to fall into old stories. I'm not enough. He got what he wanted. He's afraid of commitment. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes immaturity wears the costume of mystery. But sometimes it's spiritual. Sometimes he walks away because to stay would be a lie. Because something sacred is happening beneath the surface. And sacred things need silence to grow. In Taoist philosophy, the stillness between movement is not wasted space. It is the way itself, just as winter is not death, but gestation. What looks like absence may, in truth, be preparation, but this doesn't make it easier. You miss him. You ache in spaces he once filled. You replay the warmth of his hands, the weight of his voice, and you wonder if it was ever real. This is where the second emotional peak crests, when you stop asking whether he loved you and start asking, can I love someone even in their becoming? Because becoming is messy. It's not a highlight reel. It's not tidy promises and consistent availability. It's a soul remembering itself, and that kind of remembering often looks like retreat. In ancient myth, heroes always leave the village. They wander into the forest, into the cave, into the storm. They go alone, not because they don't love what they left behind, but because love calls them to become worthy of the very thing they desire. And this, perhaps, is his forest. This silence is his cave. His absence is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of his becoming. The mystical idea here is incubation. In many ancient traditions, the soul's transformation required time in the underworld, a symbolic space of silence, death, and solitude. The soul would disappear for a while, undergo initiation, and return reborn. So what if this is his underworld? What if love cracked him open, and now he must descend, face his fears, rewrite the scripts that taught him love equals weakness, and only then return, whole? And what if your task isn't to follow him into that cave, but to become the light outside of it? You want to hold him. You want to remind him who he is. But maybe it's not your hands he needs right now. It's your trust, not in him, but in the process. Because real love trusts not just the presence, but the absence. Not just the sweetness, but the silence. Not just the touch, but the time apart. So you become a temple of stillness. You keep your heart open, not to wait, but to witness. You build your own life, not to distract, but to remember your fullness. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And sometimes, love doesn't give you answers. It gives you the right questions. So ask yourself, can I stay rooted while he wanders? Can I remain loving while he unlearns? Can I stop chasing what already touched my soul? and trust that if it's true, it will return. This is not passivity. This is power. To hold space without collapsing, to love without clinging, to understand without needing control. This is where love becomes wisdom. You are not just a woman he once adored. You are a mirror he could not unsee, a catalyst he could not escape. And if he returns, it will not be as a man seeking comfort. It will be as one who has earned his own soul. At first, you barely recognize him. There's something quieter in his presence now, less urgency, more gravity. He's not speaking the same language he once did, though his voice still feels familiar. It's in the way he looks at you, as if he's not just seeing your face, but remembering something sacred about it. You wonder, is this the same man who left? And in a way, the answer is no, he isn't, because something inside him has been rewritten. And what's more important, so have you. When he pulled away, it felt like abandonment, like everything that was blooming between you had been plucked mid-spring. But now, standing here before you, you begin to see the truth behind the mystery. He didn't pull away to forget you. He pulled away to find himself, and by doing so, to become someone capable of choosing you, not from fear, not from need, but from soul. Jung said, "Only the wounded physician heals." And now you sense it, that he's met his wounds, that he's no longer performing strength but embodying it, that he's no longer afraid of being seen, not just in his power, but in his softness. This is the first emotional peak, the reunion that doesn't just rekindle love, but reveals what love can be, when both souls have walked through fire and returned not as fragments, but as whole. You don't rush. You don't collapse into each other. You breathe. There's a reverence now, a slowness, as if both of you know that to rush would be to dishonor the path you've taken, individually and together. He tells you things he couldn't before, about the fear, the doubt, the panic that loving you awakened in him. He tells you that your presence felt like both a mirror and a magnifying glass, that you saw things he wasn't ready to claim. And yet, instead of turning that fear into blame, you turned it into space. And that space saved him. He says he wanted to come back sooner, but something inside said, not yet. Not until the voice inside his own chest was louder than the noise he'd inherited. Not until he could stand before you and say, "I choose you," not out of loneliness, but out of knowing. This is the deeper mystery of love. It is not always the bond that makes the becoming possible. It is the separation, the sacred pause, the holy interval where two souls go inward, not to disconnect, but to remember the self that connection had awakened. You too have changed. While he wandered, you rooted. You turned loneliness into meditation, longing into clarity. You asked hard questions. You stopped trying to be the one he would return to, and instead became the one you could return to. And in doing so, you aligned not with hope, but with truth. This is the second emotional peak, the reunion that doesn't depend on outcome, but on recognition. When you look into each other's eyes and both know, we could walk away, and yet we stay, not because we must, but because something inside us knows now. You're no longer the girl waiting at the edge of his uncertainty. You are the woman who has danced with the unknown and found her rhythm within it. And him? He is no longer the boy hiding behind masculine archetypes. He is the man who faced his shadow and found not destruction, but integration. Together, you begin again, not from scratch, from wisdom, not with fantasies, with presence. And here's the unresolved mystery. Will it last? That's not the question anymore. Because permanence was never the point. Presence is, awareness is, awakening is. You don't need promises now. You need truth in each breath. He may falter again, You may withdraw, but now you know how to return to the self, to the silence, to each other. In Sufi mysticism, they say the soul must circle itself many times before it can rest in another. Perhaps that's what this was, a sacred orbit, a return to center, so that when you met again, it wasn't from hunger, but from overflow. This is love, not as possession, but as devotion, not as attachment, but as a shared awakening, not as rescue, but as recognition. I see your soul, and I bow. You are no longer afraid of him pulling away, because now you know, if he does, it's not an ending, it's a passage, and if love is real, it will find you again, not in the same form, but with the same flame. And if it doesn't, you are still whole, you are still light, you are still the sacred witness to love's unfolding. This is not just a love story, this is an initiation, and you, my love, have passed through the fire, not to bring him home, but to come home to yourself. Take a deep breath. Let it move through you like a wave, washing away the residue of fear, of confusion, of waiting. You've walked through a story of silence, distance, retreat, and return. Not just his, but yours too. Because every time you loved someone who couldn't yet love you back, every time you stayed present in the face of withdrawal, every time you chose understanding over resentment, you grew, you expanded. You are not just a person in love, you are a soul remembering its light. And now, the silence doesn't frighten you. The waiting doesn't diminish you. The absence no longer defines your worth. Because you know what it means to love without losing yourself, to hold space without collapsing into it, to remain soft yet grounded, open yet sovereign. Carl Jung believed that real relationship is not two halves making a whole. It's two wholes meeting in awareness. That's what you are becoming. Whole, aware, awake. So if he returns, you'll meet him eye to eye, not as savior and seeker, not as fixer and broken, but as soul and soul. And if he doesn't, you'll walk forward with grace anyway. Because the deepest truth is this: love doesn't just bind, it reveals. And you are the revelation, a mirror, a flame, a soul made luminous by everything it refused to let harden it